Yep.
For many young motorsport fans, the pinnacle of achievement is to become a Formula One driver. But the simple fact is, even those who might be good enough may never get their chance. Determined not to give up on his dream, today's subject did what I'm sure many of us also think about. He bought an old F1 car. However, unwilling to compromise further on his dream, he wanted a car from the era that he idolised. A howling V10 from that time when the sport's budgets seemed as endless as their red lines. But even within motorsport circles, these cars are generally considered museum pieces on account of the extreme cost and complexity of running them. Today, we're going to be given an insight into the extremely rare world of private Formula One car ownership and a demonstration that if you really want the ultimate track toy, having a big budget is just the beginning.
Hi, my name is Dan Bythewood. This is my 2001 BA Honda. I had a pretty interesting life growing up. I do have a brother and a sister, and my parents were pretty amazing. I was in film and television. By the time I was in second grade, I was both union, SAG, and AFTRA. So speaking lines for national commercials, like Jell-O pudding. I also was on a show called The Doctors, and The Doctors is a show that they actually founded Alec Baldwin in a sense, right? Which is kind of crazy. So I've been kind of working my whole life, right? If you've been doing stuff by second grade, you kind of crank away. Great parents, great growing up, lots of fun from Manhattan to the Hamptons. And we kind of grew into this really cool family. So my father was this orthodontist that was massively successful. Then he turned into an entrepreneur. So he then started a private jet company, and he had everyone from the ABC Sports and Roone Arledge and the Muppets and Jim Henson in his private jet company. And so we've grown into a bigger and bigger family that became more and more successful. But as a single person now, I'm a real estate developer in the Eastern Seaboard, predominantly in America. But we have done things as far as Montenegro, and we've done everything to Las Vegas, and then up and down the Eastern Seaboard from Boston to New York to Baltimore. The dream was to actually drive one of these, but inside of FIA regulated Formula One race car driver. So my brother and I used to watch Senna Prost, and I was the Senna guy, my brother was the Prost guy. Sorry, Chris, you lost. So I was Senna all the time, and it was amazing because there was Wide World of Sports, which doesn't exist any longer, but that's where we used to watch Formula One when we were kids. So we're circa 1980. Racing is always inside of you, and you've heard it from everyone, from Senna and every other race car driver. It's really born inside of you. So on our Long Island house, we had this enormous hill in the backyard. And as a young boy, I would drag my big wheel up the hill and fly down the hill, but there was a wall, so you had to actually turn when you hit the driveway so you didn't hit the wall, which kind of sounds like race car driving, doesn't it? But I was this really young lad, and it was pretty spectacular because my mom, when she saw it the first time, almost died. She was like, "Oh my God, my son's gonna kill himself by hitting the wall." And I zipped past the wall, and but as I get older, racing is still inside of you. So first license at 15 in terms of vehicular out of Florida, but that allowed me to bring my actual car, which was an MR2, a Toyota MR2 Turbo, onto what was then at the time Bridgehampton Raceway. Bridgehampton Raceway was a Can-Am series track, like Mario Andretti, Peter Revson, everyone drove there during the height of Bridgehampton, which is say 50s and 60s. And it was amazing track, enormous front straight, 13 corners, very, very twisty. But really, the Bridgehampton was so exciting coming down the front straight, which was like 3,100 feet. And there was a bridge because you had to cross from one side to the other. So you would line up roughly at the R, and it was blind because there's a right-hand turn, which when you hit, you would turn to the right, and then it would come into a place that you would kind of like try to just tap the brakes and then hard right in. But the Hamptons is filled with nothing but sand, so you didn't want to go off because the cartwheels would have been just disgusting. But that's how I started driving, like really driving. So that was SCCA, RCCA, both of them. I had licenses within like my time. I was 17 or so. By 18, I loved that so much. I was Barber and Skip Barber and Russell series. So then I went into racing at that level, and my plight was to do this as a sponsored Formula One driver. The hardest part in America at that point in time was that Formula One did not exist. It existed, right? It was on Wide World of Sports or things like that. However, it didn't exist for sponsors to want to put money in, or Americans generally to put money in, because very few Americans even knew what Formula One was. So we were like, America is IndyCar, right? So we used to watch guys like Paul Tracy, which we watched. We're really just car guys. But to want to be the best of the best, it meant you have to show up in Formula One, even though best in America really was, and Mario, obviously Andretti is a Formula One driver. But at that point in time, no one was really driving in Formula One that was on the American side. So I wanted to help break that barrier. But it couldn't figure out how, like the dollars are just gigantic, just absolutely gigantic, and didn't know how to make that gap work, make it work inside of people's budgets in America. There was no way for me to pull that off. So it obviously stays in the back of my mind. So I'm gonna go make some real money. I'm gonna make some money. And I learned how to be a great real estate developer and made some money in real estate. After Bridgehampton, my next favorite racetrack was Laguna Seca. I've driven Sears Point or Infineon or whatever they call that now. It's changed names so many times. Those would be like my top 3 places to drive, would have been those 3. Now granted, one of them doesn't exist any longer. It's a golf course, unfortunately. But those would be the 3 favorite places to drive. From a historic perspective, you just have to fly the flag of Monaco, followed by flying the flag of Spa, right? For totally different reasons. Monaco, iconic, amazing place to go and actually meet people, network, but also there is this amazing race and a principality that is royal family that is interested in doing great things, right? Prince Albert and all the things he does now, which everyone knows, which is to save society and kind of fix things in the ocean. So Monaco, even back then, was very interesting. And the connection to America through Princess Grace, that was all really important. But those historic tracks, Monza, here's another like amazingly historic track. So I think it's really important that we keep like the heritage of it alive, even though there's building new and the new tracks are incredible. But for me, I was in the 90s, those were zen for me. You know, pre this existing era of race car drivers where cars really just don't even break any longer, Ayrton and his pole position, 1-lap records, you know, pre-Lewis Hamilton, pre-Michael Schumacher, was zen. And I think that was really such a testament to him not accepting no. My heart was broken at Senna's death. So for me, it has to be post-Senna, and we have to put 4 to 5 years, right? So the tethers work, and right, something can always break. It doesn't have to be your fault. It's a machine, they break. So I wanted to make sure I was gonna be safe because they're really fast. So I was automatically kind of coming towards this era of Formula One cars. I wanted V10 because I wanted screaming V10 era cars, because it sounds better than a V12, surely sounds better than a V8. Even though they both have their own iconic sound, V10 by far is the era you have to gun for. And then you're looking for something that's historically iconic. BAR, historically iconic. Everyone knows Lucky Strike's brand, but it wasn't just the brand where it stopped, because during this era, you have an era which starts the cigarette ban. So I actually own two of these. One is the cigarette banned version, which says look-alike. It has the Monaco setup. And this one is obviously the iconic Lucky Strike medium downforce Hockenheim third place car. Pretty amazing to actually own them, because it's like this whole history of, yeah, I wanted to do this, I wanted to be this race car driver, I wanted, and couldn't figure it out linearly, as in a typical driver of, let's say, a Lewis Hamilton. You come up through karting, you go through GP2, you show up in like Formula One, and like you get your super license, all of that good stuff. I don't have a super license. I actually tried to get one. I tried to get one really hard. I was trying to negotiate that in this purchase. And they were like, yeah, no. No. I was like, but I could do tests in your car. And they said, yeah, no. I was like, okay, so I'll drop that one. But there were other goodies I got with this car. So the first car I tried to buy was in Monaco. Fancy, fancy Monaco. There was a Spiker. Absolutely beautiful. It was the same era of Spiker that looked like McLaren. So it was orange, silver Spiker. So the story that happened to me when I went in, because I knew the car was there, I flew to Monaco on purpose to go look at this car. And when I get there, it doesn't have any internals, no gearbox, no anything. The first place I call is a direct phone call to Extract. Super naive, right? I pick up my cell phone and I call, and they're like, Extract? I'm like, hi, my name's Dan Bythewood. I wanted to ask you how I would go about buying internal gear parts for this Spiker F1 car that I'm currently looking at. And then I was like, hello? I was like, oh, maybe this cell phone dropped. And I was like, hi, this is Dan Bythewood again. I think this phone, they were like, wait, stop talking for a moment. I was like, okay. They say to me, do you own the rights to the Spiker? I said, no. They're like, we can't talk to you. I was like, wait, but they're bankrupt. They're not even a company. They were like, so let us explain that even through bankruptcy, widget companies that build F1 cars are not allowed to talk to you. We can't have any conversation, so we have to hang up right now. And they did. So in one respect, I was like, wow, that's crazy. In other respect, I was like gutted. I was like, oh, here's my first time on touching a potential Formula One car. So, but great experience, and I appreciate them for being so honest, because it was part of my learning experience for how this car actually gets built and why it's functional and why it's actually so incredibly valuable, because I own my rights to this car. I could rebuild every single component by original manufacturer spec. I have CAD files, I have everything. I own the rights to my car. It came out of me not being able to touch that Spiker. So thanks, Extracts. So this is 11 years ago. Right, so lineage, you have to understand the lineage of this car. So if you're right now and you watch Drive to Survive, you understand who Mercedes GP is, or Mercedes. If you back up a little bit from Mercedes, you get to Braun. If you back up a little bit further, you get to Honda Formula One, a little bit further, and you get to BAR Honda, British American Racing, which comes out of British American Tobacco, right? So you have to understand the lineage. When BAR was really kind of leaving or on its way out, Braun was what stepped into really the BAR to Honda, all of them leaving the sport. Ross Braun comes and takes over the company. They win the championship with Jenson Button, and they have no space to even house cars. So they go to auction them off. So I've been doing all this research, and this is years and years later after the Spiker. So I talk to Braun, and I said to them, you know, I'm really interested in buying a race car. I know you have a whole series that you're looking to auction, but I'm not interested in going to auction. But I need certain things, and this is why I'm not going to auction, because I don't want to buy a paperweight. So we negotiated through all the working contingent aspects of the car. So this car never went to auction. It was between this and the Earth Dreams car, but Lucky Strike for me was more important to purchase. And I didn't know at this time that the second car would actually be available. It was just purely on the iconic nature of Lucky Strike. So with that being said, we negotiate out everything. So I talked to them, I said, but I need the rights. I need to be able to reproduce, because something will ultimately break, and I definitely want to be able to talk to X-Trax, some widget in the front brakes. I don't want to have this experience. And I explained to them the Monaco conversation. They said, absolutely, that is exactly what is supposed to happen. So, and I said, I wasn't mad. I was just happy to learn before I bought something for a really expensive price that I could never get to work. And in this journey over these years, I spoke to so many people in the UK, and lots of them were like, well, you'll never get it to work. You'll never get it to work. You should cut off the X-Trax transmission and throw on a rally car transmission. I was like, and then I would have bought a rally car that I paid way more money than I really should have for a rally car. Like, it makes no sense what you're saying. I don't understand why we would even be having this conversation. I'm not gonna buy the car if I have to have a rally car. I want a Formula One car. Very different category. So in talking to Mercedes GP, I had to sign a whole bunch of waivers and all that other good stuff that I was like, big deal, waivers. We do that every time we drive a Formula Ford, a Formula Renault. Like any of the race cars, you sign your life away at the track. So I was like, yeah, sure, send it. Have your lawyer send it to my lawyers, which sign that. So if it did go wrong, something happened, something terminal happened, they weren't liable. Okay, good, in the bag. Now let's get on to the car. And so I buy the rights. So I have that all in writing. I have obviously the car. And that's how this whole thing really gets to move forward, is purely like off of Monaco and this spiker. We just negotiated out, it was great. It actually never goes to auction, even though I know Bonhams is trying to, on their website, if you search for it, which I'm sure many of you will, it never went to auction. They just put up a price that they believed was actually the price. That wasn't the price, but it's okay. So I went to the factory, full factory access, amazing tour of the facility, which was Braun at the time. So we walked through, we saw so many amazing things that they could do at Formula One factories. And if they wanted to recreate Terminators and Arnold Schwarzenegger, I swear they can. It's amazing what they could build in a Formula One factory. And talking through their process, why they have like the 3rd to 5th most powerful supercomputer in its era in the country, i.e. the entire UK. So you have like RAF for the military stuff, and then Formula One. It's pretty stunning how much power they really have. And they were talking computers, and we talked about, you know, you're like, oh, well, how many gigs do you have? How many? They're like, stop. We work in teraflops. I was like, I don't even know what you just talked about. Like, what is a teraflop, right? And it's just like storage capacity and processing power. They just it's beyond amazing what Formula One teams do. And it's why they create things like KERS systems and DRS systems that no one else has ever created before. The era of 2001, you have a V10 engine. The car does do fuel stops, so you have a fuel stop entry from both sides, depending on what track you're on. So if you're doing clockwise versus counterclockwise, you need your tank on the other side. 150 decibels. It is screaming loud V10. 800 plus horsepower, 18,600, so like a tick under 19,000 RPM. At start, it's 4,000 RPM. On the steering wheel, you can change anywhere from 10,000 RPM to full 18,600. You could manage how much power goes through. It's fully functional. There is no third pedal inside of the car because it actually is proper. We clutch off of the steering wheel, so these two fingers at the bottom, and then upshift, downshift. So it is everything that a Formula One car is supposed to be, which was part of my requirement that we were building, not a rally car, a Formula One car. The gearbox needed work. There was no engine. The electronics were all gone. So we had to refabricate basically all the internals. There was no fire extinguisher system, which exists in the car now. So part of my mechanics, and their name is Renwork, out of Germany. They're all from Toyota Formula One. And they're like, Dan, we won't build something if we cut corners, because you could kill yourself really quick in this. So it has to be perfect. I said, okay, I don't want to necessarily die quickly, so let's build it proper. And the costs just mount. It just costs so much money to get these things up and running, especially because you're building single widgets at a time. You're not buying them in bulk because you don't need 40 of a single gear. You need like 2. So as costs are mounting, we come to this point where they're like, Dan, we have to crack test the car. I was like, okay, so what do you have to do? They were like, we have to X-ray the car. Instantly in my head, I'm like, I know how much it is to X-ray a pinky, no less an entire car. I was like, guys, seriously. They're like, no, you can't not do this. You have to crack test it, because if a suspension part has a failure or a fault and you're at 200 miles an hour, I was like, yeah, but these German dudes are so logical. I was like, sign it up, put it in, X-ray the whole thing. So we crack test the whole car, look for any fault, fix any fault in any of the carbon. So this takes forever. This is like years long of process to make sure that this all works properly, finding all the parts that are right, and make sure that you're going to functionally be able to drive a Formula One car under load, at speed, and that's what we've built. If you go back to 2001, Formula One's a very different sport. Engines are not meant to last for a long time. Component parts are not meant to last for a long time. And they had $400 million a year to go racing. I don't. I just really don't. So when looking at this, outside of Honda being very, very protective of actually letting things out of their hands as it pertains to their IP, they also weren't meant to be reliable. So when you look at the distance that these engines in 2001 went, they didn't really go. They had an engine just for qualifying. And then they would throw that away and then do a race on a race engine, and then throw that away and come back and do it all over again. That is not even reasonable to think about as a normal human being. It's just not possible to actually. And then when they blew up, they already knew they were throwing it away. So you could just throw things away and it was, okay, I have $400 million. Well, of course we'll throw that away. Why, you wouldn't rebuild it. You can't rebuild it when the pistons shoot through the block, right? It's garbage. So in understanding those as the parameters, we go to Cosworth. Cosworth LK is what sits in this. So Cosworth at this point has actually figured out lots of really great things because they're in Formula One, but they started to introduce the idea of not throwing things away and being so wasteful in terms of a sport, but the component parts have to last for much longer periods of time. So the engine that's in here currently would probably outlast the Honda of the era by 5 times, if not longer, right? Because you detune it on the steering wheel. So if we're not going out to like blast the craziest lap at 18,600, oh yeah, we're running at 14,000 on steering wheel, 16,000, and it increases the lifespan. So it was done on purpose. So then the steering wheel, obviously brand new programs of how to control the engine. The engine's actually really amazing. It's a V10 with 20 fuel injectors, 2 spec as they ran the LK engines actually in Formula One. So it just had so much more time for development that the engines are just a million times different. And it really was, if I wanted, once again, just to have a car that sat as a paperweight, and yeah, I found a way to get Honda to sell me just the Honda engine, and I was never gonna go on track with it, yeah, that makes sense. That was never my plan. I told you I wanted to be a race car driver. That means I will drive this, which I have driven this car already. After it left Brackley, it goes to Germany, and that's where all the rebuild and everything happens. The engineers call after years of time, and they said, Dan, we want to do rollout. If you want, we could hire just a regular driver, and then we could do this rollout. Or if you want to come, you could be the driver. Your decision, it's your car. I was like, I'm going to drive it. What's hard about this car is finding some place that's interested in letting you turn it on their racetrack. 150 decibels means everyone just about is like, oh, hell no. Are you kidding? Our max is 120. I'm 150. So screaming V10. So it's so different. So it's hard to find places. So we found an airfield, i.e. a private plane airport that allowed us to come and play. So very, very happy that we're allowed to play on the private plane, and it's in Germany. It's really funny because we were kind of going and doing laps in between planes landing. So it's active airport. So they're like, okay, you could go. I did spin her once, I'll put that out there in the world. And it was just purely on cold tires. We didn't do tire warmers at all for any of it, but we were probably like 12,000 RPM, and I was just so excited that we were out of our first run, which was really, really short. It wasn't a full airstrip. It was just a quick loop, bring her in, turn her off, make sure that nothing is going to detonate, look at all the data, is everything running fine? But my first run was 10,000 RPM. It was this really, really tight loop, but it was everything. It was everything, because now, right, fulfilling your childhood dream as wanting to be someone who was a Formula One driver. So yeah, maybe it might not be fully FIA regulated Formula One, but this is a FIA homologated Formula One car that I'm driving. So it was zen. It was legitimately zen for me. So I don't think that there was a better way to describe the excitement that you would have. Think of any dream that whatever your dream is. I want to be an astronaut. You get shot into outer space. You'd be just exuding everything that your body has. And that was the drive, the first run. What I loved about Formula One before is very different than the experience in Formula One now, right? So yes, I love the grittiness of it. It's almost like saying, Dan, you're a New York kid, so what did you love about New York then versus now? New York now is a Disneyland. You just about don't have to think about crime. When I was a kid, there were like 3,000 people that got murdered every year. It's Disneyland, look, Vegas and Miami, and right, where racing was not a posh, easy place to get to, right? To get to Spa is a whole nother experience, to get all the way out through the forest, and there's not a lot of great places to be inside of the racetrack because most of it is in the middle of the forest, and the drivers are just going through massive amounts of territory, and then you get a corner where you put a stand and you're like, okay. I love the fact that Formula One sport is growing. They found a way through Drive to Survive to meet people at their house, on their couch, to really get inside of what drivers are like. But it's really pretty amazing to see how far they've been able to transform the sport, to grow revenue for the sport, and all of that you need to actually just be better. So hopefully that drives younger generations of kids from all portions of society, all races, creeds, right? We're talking about potentially really having a woman driver now, right? There's like the whole feeder series. So there's a lot that's changing.
And it is Dan's desire to see change and inclusivity in motorsport which actually made today's video possible. Thanks for organising this interview has to go to my good friend Anthony from Sports and Touring, because his experience of working with his son in motorsport got him the attention of an organisation called Driven by Diversity, and it is through them that the connection to meet Dan was made.
So with Driven by Diversity, the first introduction happened at the time of when Black Lives Mattered or BLM, and it was this push into society to actually start to be more inclusive than exclusive of people. So I wrote this story about, because there are lots of people that are mixed race these days, so the white side of a family, i.e. the father, mother, didn't matter, won't know what to tell their kids if they come out a skin color that looks like mine. So Lindsay read that. She calls me up and asks me if I would be on the Driven by Diversity kind of, I guess to call it lightly, it was like a board that we set up so that we could talk through just issues and try to get it into a sport like Formula One. So hence Formula One, yet again, it comes all back. So Driven by Diversity was really exciting because it was about starting to transform what is historically a sport that did not have black people in it, right, from my perspective. It definitely didn't have women in it. It didn't have, you have a smattering of Japanese and Chinese that have like started to work their way in, or Indians with Vijay Mallya and kind of Force India. But when you look at it, it's still predominantly a field that doesn't have tons and tons of diversity, whether it's inside of the factory or on the racetrack. So I appreciate what Lewis is trying to do, which is also very similar to driving diversity. My era of Formula One, there was no one. So they've done everything from help drivers try to connect with whether they're teams or people that have been a part of teams. They've helped a lot of individuals that I personally know just connect with other people that have been there. So part of it is to not recreate the same wheel someone's been on. It's like, well, that path doesn't work. So this is how I would augment even my own role of being someone who wanted to be in Formula One. Yes, I figure out kind of an interesting way to fulfill my childhood dream. However, I would have loved to actually be in just pure race car driving, Formula One, as a driver that actually was really capable, but couldn't figure it out. So I think it's really trying to connect with people, utilizing everyone's network. We have a very unique network, I do, and I try to utilize that to bridge different gaps for people. The way I explain it to people is you need to have a light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of how far that light is. If it's just black, you just won't ever get there. You won't get there because there's no inspiration. That glimmering hope that someone did it is really pretty amazing. So Lewis creates this glimmering hope. It would be such a shame if that tunnel was totally black and the Hamiltons give up and we never get to see the best driver that's ever been. Mind-boggling. Mind-boggling to have that as a conversation. And that is actually really the conversation, that there is a potential that that doesn't happen. And how many other people did you potentially miss out on, right? So it's not just all the rich kids that should have all the fun. Like, imagine if American football was just rich kids. I think the sport has to be more inclusive because natural, God-given talent has nothing to do with someone's bank account.
Okay.
So we're going to do a bunch of track days this year. So now that COVID is finally over and I could fly here, the car could fly back to America, but there are track days that we are lining up. We're talking to Lorena about driving and doing test days with her, and like she owns the Schumacher car, and my mechanics own 2005 Alonso Renaults. So I want to go drive with some really fun people and showcase something that is really, really unique. There are not many of us that actually have working, functional Formula One cars. We're scattered all across the planet, and getting people together doesn't happen, so it's a really unique club. And I like to try to bring that glimmer of hope to people that might not have ever seen one. The last thing I did with Formula One Formula One itself was the lookalike car went to Chicago when they were doing demonstrations. It was not a runner, but if you could see the inner city kids that actually got to see me, they're like shocked. They're like, who are you? It was amazing. So to be an inspiration to people, and then to tell them about other people and how their experiences are, and how do you start, and who do you talk to, and where did you go, just to even start. So trying to help people with even a path forward, I think is really important. So this is a funny story because I used to have a bunch of cool cars, and then I bought this. And then it was like, okay, cool, I still have cool cars. Then this became a runner. Sell all that crap, it's all slow. All of it, it is garbage. I don't care what it is. You could have a Veyron, you could have a Lamborghini, throw all that away. So we sell everything. I'm trying to figure out exactly where I go with other cars. Like I have AMG stuff like that, but it's all meant to be comfortable, tour around, because nothing is ever gonna be this. So I'm still in the process of peeling my head out of, this is really where everything should be. What do you mean I can't go to Starbucks and quickly zip through, and you can't change my tires and do a fuel stop in literally under 4 seconds? So I'm working on what I really want, and it can't be, it's gonna compete with anything close to this, because it just will never be that. So I've done older cars before and rebuilt like gray market 930 Porsches and did tons of horsepower with them, and that was tons of fun. I've done, I like AMG, they're just really super reliable, and they have mass distance these days, but AMG's coming out with like EQS and all of this really great hybrid. So I want to be cognizant of the fact that I should offset my carbon footprint with the EQS. but that's where it really is.